Hi, I'm Molly and welcome to Casting the Net, a new youth-led series hosted by teens for teens, exploring the breadth and the depth of our online worlds. In each episode, we cast the net wide to learn about the opportunities and challenges the internet brings and hear from experts from around the globe. Whether it's chatting to our friends, doing homework, using social media, or gaming, a lot of what we do happens online. The internet provides us with many opportunities for connecting, for entertainment, for supporting, and for learning. And just like children and teenagers have rights in the offline world, we also have rights in the online world. Why is it important to know what these are? It's to make sure that we know that we are being treated fairly, being protected, and also to know what responsibilities we have online. To find out more, I'm delighted to be joined by Julie Ahern, Legal Policy and Service Director with the Children's Rights Alliance.
This interview was recorded prior to the publication of a report by an expert group which concluded that a mechanism allowing an individual to submit a complaint directly to the new regulator that will be established through the Online Safety and Media Regulation Bill is feasible.
Firstly, will you tell me a bit about yourself and what you do?
So as you said, Molly, I am the Director of Legal Policy and Services with the Children's Rights Alliance. So what we do as an organisation is we campaign and advocate for government to make laws, policies and services in Ireland better for children and young people. So we also have a legal information helpline, and this is where children and families and their parents and anyone working with them can ring us up and get information about children's rights on any topic, including online rights. So I work on the information helpline and also in our campaign work.
As teenagers, what rights do we have online in the online world?
So as you mentioned at the start, you have the same rights online as you have offline. And really, when you look at the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, so that's an international instrument that sets out children's rights. All the rights you have under that, you have online. So these would include things like the right to information, the right to freedom of expression, the right to protection from harm, and many, many others. But I suppose some of the key rights that children and young people have, particularly online in Ireland, are things like the protection of personal information, protection of data, right not to be harassed online, and there are many, many more. And I think what's key is that, children and young people remember that the rights that they have in person, they have online.
Yeah, and they're all very, very important.
Really important.
Yeah. And Julie, last year, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child wrote down and set out children's rights in the digital world. General Comment 25 states that the rights of children must be respected, protected, and fulfilled in the digital environment. In simple terms, what does this mean for us?
I'll try to make it simple. It's quite a big document. So what it does, yeah, of course it is. It's one of the official documents. But what it does, it was actually made and written in conjunction with children and young people. So they would have fed into all the process. And what it does, I suppose, is it recognizes, first of all, how important the online world is for children and young people. You mentioned it earlier. All the things that you do online are so key for your lives and they're so important. And a lot of it is actually really, really good. What it does as well is it sets out very clearly that the rights you have in person under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, you have online. But it also then puts certain obligations on states to do certain things to protect children and young people. So I could talk for an hour on what it says, but I suppose some of the key things that might be, of interest to people is that it does put out there that states now have to provide information and conduct awareness campaigns on children's rights in the online world. So that means every country now has an obligation to do that, which is really, I suppose, positive to see that this is something that they will actually have to answer to the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child for. They also then have to look at education. And it really does set out that education is one of the biggest things for children and young people online. And it says that states will have to put forward educational programs for children, for parents, for caregivers, for the general public, and for policymakers, so that they all can improve their knowledge of children's rights online. And then I suppose some of the really interesting stuff it does is that it now puts an obligation back on the state again, so back on Ireland, to make sure that businesses, all online platforms, comply with their responsibilities to protect children and young people online under the convention. So this means now that when Ireland gets examined by the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, which happens every couple of years, they will now be asked what they are doing to make sure that businesses are protecting children online. So it really is important because it looks at all the different areas, from the positive, where it's about education, it's about information, to things like making sure that businesses do their job to protect children and young people. But then also it has really specific things around advertising and marketing that are really, really crucial to protecting children's data, stopping profiling or targeting of children with online marketing. So there's loads in it, but that's just some of the kind of key important pieces that I would see in it.
Yeah, that's incredible, because like education is huge, and then like businesses protecting people are huge because their data is being taken every day.
Yeah, exactly.
So do we have special protections as teenagers and children compared to adults?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing to say is, and I think we've said it a couple of times already, but it's always worth saying again, you have the same rights online as that you have in person. But also, as a young person, you have the same rights as an adult online. So your rights aren't restricted because of the fact you're under 18 or under 16. There are some special protections. So, for example, the digital age of consent is set at 16 in Ireland. And what that means is that if you're under 16, you cannot consent to online service providers processing your personal data. And I know we're going to talk a little bit later about what personal data is, but it's a way to protect children and young people's personal data. So, for example, if you're under 16 and trying to set up a TikTok or a BeReal account, you will need your parent consent. And then that's one way, that's one of the special protections that exist for children and young people online. So that's an example of one of them.
Thank you very much. Now we have some frequently asked questions from teenagers about their rights online that you might be able to answer for us. Firstly, what is personal information? What do companies want, and what rights do I have?
Okay, so there's a good bit in that. So I might start with personal information. So personal information is, our personal data, as you'll sometimes see it be called, is information about you from which you can be identified. So it would include things like your name, your address, your date of birth, your medical information, your personal email addresses, location data, your mobile device's IP address. So that would be the unique code. I don't know, I'm explaining to young people who probably know, but I'll say it anyway. A unique code that your device for your device that allows it to operate on the internet, and then your behavior online. So personal information is quite a broad thing, and companies want it for loads of different reasons. Primarily, they want it so that they can market things towards you or sell things. So some sites, for example, like Netflix, would charge a monthly subscription. But most of the companies online, they're available to us for free. So one of the ways that they make money, which is what most companies are looking to do, is by collecting your data, your personal data, so all those things I mentioned, your personal information. So often information is stored about what you look at, your location, your interest, and then the type of things that you buy. And what they do then is they use this information to put forward marketing and advertising campaigns to target specific customers. So this means that they'll be able to send an ad your way based on information such as, for example, they might say, we want to send ads to all girls age 17 who buy makeup. And they'll be able to use that information to put marketing campaigns towards you. Or they might even sell that data to another company, and then they can market things towards you. So really, your data is very valuable. And companies, it's really valuable to them so that they can sell things or encourage things to be sold to you online.
That is definitely a big thing. Like, definitely see a lot of companies taking things and it'd be popping up in your feed from different aspects. But are people allowed to say anything they like online to other people, or like just make public statements?
So the short answer is no. Your speech online is the same as your speech in real life. So what that means is that if you engage in things like hate speech or defamation, which is when you say something that would damage another person's reputation that isn't true, it will have the same consequences as if it happened in person. So just because it's online doesn't mean that you can say whatever you'd like. You still have the same consequences, and some of those consequences can even be criminal. So it's worth people thinking about what they're saying online and making sure that they're not doing something that would harm another person.
A lot of people ask me, does celebrities have the same like outlines for like use of voice when they use it online? Are they like restricted to what they can say, just as like We are.
Yeah, so celebrities are the same as other people. They don't have a special status online.
Yeah. No,
So
some people say to me that they think they do because like they see more about what they say, if you get me.
yeah, so I mean, for example, if a celebrity was to say something about you that would harm your reputation and that would be untrue, that is known as defamation, they could still be sued for defamation.
Okay.
So no matter who you are, you don't have the right to say whatever you'd like online.
Yes, thank you. If somebody is harassing me online, what rights do I have?
I mean, the first thing that I suppose the people should be aware of is a new law called, the big long title of it is the Harassment and Harmful Communication and Related Offences Act 2020. We know it as Coco's Law. And what that does is it makes it a criminal offence to harass someone online. So what someone should do if they're being harassed online is first of all talk to an adult that they know and trust. But what they can then do is report the behavior to the provider, the online site. So if it's on one of the big online platforms, you can report it directly to them. And now you can report it to the Gardaí. It's a criminal offence. So you do not have to put up with harassment. You have a right not to be harassed. And it's really important that people know that, particularly children and young people, that there is something they can do about it.
Yeah, the Coco's Law is definitely huge, especially now. And I think should definitely be shown more in schools as well.
Definitely.
Can you pretend to be someone else online?
No, you shouldn't, is the first thing. But you shouldn't do it, because I suppose really, I mean, what you should be doing in that instance, if someone is if someone's impersonating someone else, you can report their behavior to the online site provider, but also to the Gardaí, because impersonating someone is something that you cannot do offline, so you cannot do it online. So I think that's really clear. I think people think that because it feels a little bit more hidden away that you can impersonate someone, but you can't. And it is something that people can contact the Gardaí about. And it could be fraud, depending on what you're doing when you're impersonating someone. So it's really important that people know that.
Yeah, it is very important. I know we spoke a bit about this earlier, but the digital age of consent in Ireland is 16. What does this mean?
So what it means is that if you're under 16, so we'll just say if you're 15, you cannot consent to any online service that processes your data. So what that means is we talked a little bit about what processing data is. So any service that does that. So for example, most social media accounts will do that. So TikTok is one that does that. So you will have to get your parent to consent on your behalf. So that's what it means. And I suppose really what it's designed to do is to protect your data if you're under the age of 16. So it's one of those special protections that we talked about earlier. So you have a right to have your data protected differently if you're under 16 than if you are over 16.
And is there a way that they can tell if the person is like under 16 online? Like when they're signing up for these platforms? I know like it says consent to parents, but is there a way even that they know that the parent is actually consenting to this?
A lot of the platforms will ask for your date of birth. I mean, as far as I'm aware, I'm not quite sure what the technology is that they're developing at the moment, but most of them will just ask for your date of birth, which, can be easily to navigate around if you're able to do maths. But really, I suppose what's important is for young people to know that it's not just there to be inconvenient or just to be something just there just to annoy them or to extra that they have to think about. It's there actually to protect their data. So like when we talked about it earlier around, what they can use your data for, they can sell personal information about you, everything about you, your location, your age, your gender, what you like, what you don't like. And that is something that is really personal. So the reason why that's there is to protect your data if you're under 16, and it gives you that special protection. So while there is no, hard and fast way that they can know that it's not a parent, it is really important for young people to know that it is actually to protect them. It's not just to annoy them. It's actually to make sure that their data can't be used.
Yeah, and I think that is incredibly important to know. And now in Ireland, it's illegal to share intimate images of somebody without their consent. What are the rights in this issue and how can you exercise those rights?
Yeah, so we talked about Coco's Law earlier, and that's the piece of law that makes it a criminal offence to share images of someone without their consent. So if someone puts an intimate image or threatens to put an intimate image of you online without your consent, you should contact the Gardaí. It is a criminal offence, particularly under the age of 18. you need to be sure that you're contacting the Gardaí about that. But also what you can do is you can contact the site provider to remove the material, and they will be obliged to remove it because it will be illegal material to have an intimate image put up without your consent. So the first thing to do is to contact the Gardaí and the site provider. But really, I think what's important again is that you talk to someone that you can know and trust. And, if you're feeling unsure about that, you can talk to people like spunout.ie or childline.ie. They can kind of help you kind of how to approach that conversation with the parent, because it's not an easy thing to tell them that this has happened, but it is really important because it can be really, really serious.
Yes, that is really true. It can be very serious. And now we've talked about some of the online rights and the responsibilities for children and young people. Do you think that more can be done to ensure that we have enough rights?
A lot more can be done to ensure that children and young people have enough rights. I think we've only really started to scratch the surface on children's rights online, because there's so much happening that isn't regulated. And I think what we need is more laws to protect children and young people. So there is a law that is going through the Irish Houses of Parliament at the moment called the Online Safety and Media Regulation Bill. And what that does is that it's going to set up a new online safety commissioner. And that person will have special powers over the online world. They'll have powers around education, around awareness raising. So some of the things we talked about earlier under the general comment. But also it'll be able to hold those platforms accountable that might not, operate in a way that protects children and young people. And one of the things that is missing from the bill that we would like to see brought in Ireland is what's known as an individual complaints mechanism. So what this is this is a way for children and young people who might make a complaint to one of the online platforms, that if they're not getting a response, or if something is not happening, like, for example, if there's a piece of it's a picture not being taken down, an intimate image or something like that not being taken down off the platform, they'll have somewhere else to go to get that taken down or to get their problem resolved quickly. And that is something that is missing at the moment. So that is something that we need to look at in Ireland, is how we can ensure that when something goes wrong online, children, young people and their families can get an answer really quickly, get material taken down, get them removed, and make sure that when something goes wrong, there's somewhere else for them to go. Because as we know, unfortunately, the platforms aren't always the most responsive, and people don't always get what they need done by the platforms. Another thing that we need to look at is making sure companies design online services with safety at the heart of it. So this is known as safety by design. And this is something that will be really important, because it will mean at the very beginning, the companies have to think about safety and how they're going to keep people safe on their platform. And then the final thing I think that we talked about, and I think, you might even have some opinions on this, is around education. More needs to be done around education. And I know you're one of the council members on Webwise, so I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about what you think needs to be done in education. I'm putting you on the spot now. But I think it's one of the key things that we need to really look at in Ireland, is how we can educate people about their rights and responsibilities online.
Yeah, they are all definitely important. And for me, education is a big thing. I'm actually dyslexic, so I'm always big talking about making policies more inclusive online for people like me, because I do think there's a lot more education needed on that side of things would be big for me, because I understand that a lot of online learning now is done, all learning is done online. So it cannot be fully inclusive for all people. And I do think there needs to be more protection kind of made around that, because it can make people very isolated. And that's just one aspect of many things. And finally, what is your top piece of advice for us about being aware of our rights online?
So I suppose, the top thing for me is that young people do have a lot of rights online, and it's about knowing where to get information that is right and that is accurate, and that will help them to exercise those rights in a way that's really positive for them and that they can be protected. So my top piece of advice is knowing where to get the information. So Webwise is a great source of information for children and young people. Spunout.ie, I think I mentioned earlier, another fantastic source of information. We do have a plain English guide on children's legal rights and entitlements in Ireland. It's called Know Your Rights. And that contains a section about children's rights online. So for me, the top piece of advice is know where to go, where you can get information for when, and hopefully it doesn't happen, but if something goes wrong, where you can get the information about what to do. And the other thing is, look at how you can make sure other people know about their rights online. So you can talk to your friends, spread the knowledge, spread the education, and spread the word that children and young people do have rights online, that they're really important and that they all need to know more about them.
Yes, that's definitely where education comes into another big thing as well, like more workshops and things in school about like where people can find these rights would be wonderful, in my opinion. I think that's great advice that you just gave. Now, thank you so much for Julie for joining us today. I really appreciate it, and your words of wisdom were amazing, and thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much, Molly. It's been great to chat to you today.
It's been wonderful talking to you.